Hey guys, so in part two, I'm going to take you through this Unreal Engine portion. So you want to create a new project and just give that project a name. So in this new project, the first things first, you need to make sure that LiveLink is running and working in the app. So as long as you're on the same Wi-Fi connection, you should see your iPhone show up here. I'm going to assume you guys know how to install LiveLink off the store, and you're ready to move on to the next step. So let's import that FBX we just exported from 3ds Max. And under the Advanced tab, we just need to make sure to import those morph targets. Let's go import all. And we're going to open up this character. So I'm going to update the material first off, just so that we can see an accurate representation. And I'm just going to import the texture files first. And then I can just drag those into the material graph here and connect them to my base color. Then I can hit apply and we're ready to move on. So first things first, we're going to need to go to the skeletal mesh. I'm going to double click on that, and you want to double check it, so you can go to the morph targets and you should see all of those morph targets that we exported from 3ds Max. And you know they're working if you scrub through the channels and you see them updating correctly. Okay, so moving on, we're going to need to create a animation blueprint. So let's create a new folder here just to keep organized. And I'm going to right click, I'm going to go to animation, and I'm going to go to animation blueprint. And let's select our skeleton we imported, give it a name, and let's open that up. So the first thing we need to do is we need to create some variables. So I'm going to move my head out of the way so you can actually see them. And let's rename this one here head rotation, call it a rotator. And the second one I'm going to call upper neck rotation. I don't know if I can move my head out of the way for you guys, but lower neck rotation. And you just want to make sure that those variables are called rotator. Okay, so let's go to the event graph first. And I'm going to right click here and I'm going to create a evaluate live link. This is just going to bring in all of our live link data from the iPhone. Let's connect those two and let's change it so that it uses the iPhone. Now that iPhone name will be whatever you have set up in the app. I just called it iPhone. So let's create a get property value and let's change the property name to head roll. And we're going to duplicate this 3 times here. The second one I'm going to call head yaw. And for the last one, I'm going to call it head pitch. Okay, perfect. So let's line those up and let's wire up the data result into each of those. Okay, so we're going to need something also called a map range clamped node. And what we're going to do is we're going to wire in the value for the top one, and I'm going to set it to -1, 1, -90, and then 90. And again, we're going to have to duplicate this 3 times. So let's wire in the second one, and we can keep all the values the same for that. And we're going to wire in a third one as well. Now the only thing I'm going to change in this third one is I'm going to change the values here to 70 and -70. Now these values might change based on the character you're trying to create, but I'll take you through that after. Now based on which version of Unreal you're running, you might have to do float times float, or in the newest version 5.1, you can just hit the multiply symbol and bring up this float multiply modifier. So it actually automatically changes the value based on what you're pinning in. So let's just create a few of these nodes, and I'm going to wire these up like so. And under the values, I'm going to change it to 0.4, 0.4, and 0.4. Now we're going to make a make rotator node, and this order in which I'm pinning these up might change as well. And again, once you're rigging up your own character, you might need to change the order of these wires based on what you're trying to do, and based on which way your character is oriented. So let's continue. I'm going to duplicate these 3 times and wire them like so as well. Again, they can stay as 0.4, and I'm going to duplicate it one more time and wire in the return values into each one of these multiply floats. So the only thing I want to change in this one though is I want to change it to 0.2, 0.2, and 0.2. Okay, so the next step, we can drag in our variables and we want to go set the variable. So I'm going to drag in the top one, and then I'm going to drag in the upper neck rotation, set upper neck rotation, connect that into the rotation value, and lower neck rotation, we're going to set that there as well. Lastly, last step, I promise, we're going to go to sequence and we're going to go to drag in the valid frame data into there. And then we're going to go then 0 into the top one, then 1 into the second one, and then we're going to add a pin and wire that into the very bottom one. So that should be all the steps we need for the event graph. But just to wrap it up, we're going to have to jump into the anim graph and do one last step for making that work. So in the animation graph, let's just move our outpose pose to the right. We're going to need something called link live pose. So let's link our iPhone and let's create a local 2 component. And let's wire that in here. And I'm going to use a transform modifier bone modifier. So with this one, we're going to wire in our variables. So let's first start with the upper neck rotation. And let's wire that into the rotation. And the other one we're going to do in the component pose. Now with this transform bone node, we're going to need to set the bone to modify. Now the way I did this is I grabbed the neck twist 2 bone. You're going to have to look at the rig that's generated, but that is basically the middle of the neck. And so I'm going to set the rotation mode to replace existing, and I'm going to set it to bone space. So let's copy this over and set the component node here, wire up a rotation, and again, I'm going to switch this to a different bone. I'm going to make sure that this middle one here is for the head. And again, make sure that it should copy all the previous settings, but we want to replace that existing and make sure that it's in bone space. And lastly, for the lower neck rotation, we just need to set the bone to be the lowest part of the bone, which in this case is the neck twist 1 bone. Okay, so now we just need to convert this back component to local, wire that in, and wire in finally the result. So let's compile that and save it. And we're ready to move on to facial motion capture. So if I drag in that blueprint we just created, and I rotate it here 90 degrees, scale it up so we can see it a bit bigger, and I zoom in here, when I press play, it will be working, but you can't see it because the camera is not in the proper position. So really quick, let's just create a new cinema camera from a camera angle we're currently viewing. And I'm just going to go into the level blueprint in order to have this be the default camera that plays so we can see it working in our viewport. Let's go to open level blueprint, and I'm going to right click here and I'm going to get the player controller. And I'm going to have to minimize this just because I need to drag in that camera we just created. And lastly, we can do the final event. So let's drag out a new pin, and I want to do Z view target with blend. And I'm going to wire in the player controller to target and the main camera to new view target. So let's compile, save, and now when we press play in Unreal Engine, that'll be our default camera view. Perfect. So now our animation is working, our head is rotating correctly, and this is where all the fun starts. So I've been pretty obsessed with LiveLink. It's really handy as a tool. But you might notice that when you press play, actually when you turn your head left, your character turns right, or when you move your head down, your character looks up. So I'm just going to show you really quickly how you can check and modify this to make sure it works for your character. So in order to do some trial and error, you just want to wire one pin up to the make rotator node, and you can see which way that is working. Now it'll be locked to just the head up and down movement. If that is incorrect, if you're moving your head left to right and it's moving the character's head up and down, well, you know now that you have to wire it into a different section. So you can kind of just go one by one through these wires until you correctly get the head movement that matches what you're doing in LiveLink. And that's what I did. So eventually I figured out the correct order in which to wire these pins up to the make rotator. The other thing is when you're moving your head position up, you might notice that your character is actually looking down. So that has to do with the map range clamped node. You might have to switch the negative values here. So it might have to switch from 70 to negative 70 in the A range and vice versa in the B range. And that'll just reverse it so that, you know, when you move your head up, it now correctly moves up and down as so. So that'll be just something that you guys have to play around with. I'm just showing you the values that end up working for my character. If you're coming out of 3ds Max, it should work the exact same. But it's pretty simple to get working in whatever app you're using. Anyway, I hope this guys helped you out, and yeah, looking forward to seeing what you create. And I'll see you next time. Anyway, you can waste a lot of hours doing this.